Please listen carefully.
Hi, I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
And this is Practical Bass, where each week we pick a topic of interest to you, the working bass player, and we dissect it and look at it from a few different angles and hopefully expose some wisdom or some pithy knowledge that is going to help you take your gigs and your gear to the next level. That is our mission. You'll find it on our website at practicalbass.com, where you can get in touch with us through our contact form, or you can simply email us at podcast@practicalbass.com. We love hearing from our listeners. Please don't be shy. Reach out. And even if it's just to say hello, Dave and I love getting listener mail. And you also can find us on social media as well. Facebook, on Instagram, on Google+, Twitter. We look forward to hearing from you. And we hope that you will share this podcast with your bass playing and non-bass playing musician friends. And we hope to hear from you soon. So what are we going to talk about today, Dave?
Today we're talking about being the student.
Being the student, like, I have this vision of like Uma Thurman in Kill Bill.
That's right.
And like just whacking your hand against the board again and again. If our listening audience, if you are of an appropriate age and you are not a delicate of constitution, I highly recommend checking out Kill Bill, because I think Uma Thurman's whole thing with studying with the master, the Kung Fu master Pai Mei, is
it.
That is the thing.
That's right. Yeah, we're going to talk, we're going to explore practicing habits, practicing techniques. We're going to talk about practicing, being that student.
So this was actually a topic that you brought in, and it was really like fully baked.
Yeah.
So, you know, you're taking the lead here.
I am.
How did you come to this topic as something that you really, really wanted to address in the podcast? Like, what made this resonate with you?
Yeah, because I came at you like hot and heavy with this one.
Bam.
I think I called you like
right out the gate.
I'm like,
I know exactly what we should do. And I was like, okay, Dave.
Yeah.
It's 3 a.m.
On a Tuesday, that's cool.
No, it wasn't. It truly was not. But no, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have my personal life schedule has shifted around. I have empty pockets. It's busier at work, but there's movement that happened in my schedule. So now I have sort of this free time. And it's actually part of what stirred this up is we recently, probably a few weeks back, did a whole topic around. We did a podcast around time blocking.
Yes,
and just like any other topic that we explore, it'll sit in my head and kind of rotate. Like, do I practice what I preach, or what we explore? Am I putting this to use, or am I just talking about it? And I really try to make sure that it actually unfolds into something.
Right.
So I was thinking about time blocking. One of the pieces there was that we were talking about time blocking practice. Meanwhile, I'm on the road a lot now, so I'm listening to all these podcasts, and I'm listening to all of these like amazing bass players, right? Guys that have been in it for decades, and some cats that have been like, they're right out of Berkeley and they're crushing it. And the thing is so many of them are talking about their practicing and getting really technical about it.
Right.
So all of a sudden, like in the spirit of being honest with how I manage my time, I hammered myself with these three questions, which is like, number one, how often do I really practice? Like daily, weekly, what does it really look like?
Right.
Number two, what is practicing to me? Like today, is it like practicing songs that I need to learn, or working specifically to learn about the bass and music in general? Like where does my practicing actually sit? And the third thing for me was like in being honest with myself, where like what has that practicing that I've done, let's say for the past 6 months or 12 months, can I really show what that's done, or am I at more or less a standstill?
Like, where am I now compared to where I was a year ago?
Exactly.
Yeah.
You know, and this isn't to beat myself up or whatever. I think that there's just times where you just have to be honest with yourself.
Yeah. I mean, you're basically doing that kind of self-awareness,
right,
and sort of self-examination.
Right.
And when you don't do that, I kind of feel like that's when you really do get in a rut. It's when you don't feel as good about your life if you don't ever think about, like, what have I accomplished in the last year?
Right.
You know, it can be a lot more than you think. And on the other hand, if it's not as much as you had hoped, you have the chance to change that, but you can't do it if you never look at it.
Right. Yeah. Which is like, and we'll get to this, but that for me, this all was kind of coming to a peak, I would say about 3 weeks ago. And it just hit me. And I thought, wow, like, what's cool about recognizing that, about being honest with myself, is that it doesn't matter, I can draw the line right now and create habits. And then all of a sudden, like, it just exploded, like all these different things that I've always said that I wanted to do or whatever. And I do have practicing in place, but like I really started to design a plan, and I thought this is a great place to talk about what that could look like.
Right.
And the starting point for me is to like figure out, what does practice really look like? What does it look like to me now? What does it look like in the past?
Yeah.
And that's probably the first question that I ask. So what, I guess just to kind of share what our thoughts are, what our views are, what does practice look like for you?
Yeah. So I can tell you in the past, I spent probably the first 4 or 5 years that I was playing bass. That was really strictly woodshedding. Now, I did learn some songs. That is a way that I kind of learned my way around the fretboard and learned a bit about, taking what I knew already about music, because I played instruments for years and years before I ever picked up bass. But I needed to learn the bass roll and how do you attack the notes when you're playing bass? Like, what kind of parts work in different songs?
Right.
There was a little of that, and I was doing a lot of listening, but I would say more than that, way more than that, the scales were very much tipped towards playing technique studies, play scales, play etudes, play different studies, play, fingering, different fingerings for the same kinds of scales.
Right.
Learning all the notes on the fretboard up and down and having those under your fingers.
Yes.
That sort of thing. I mean, it really was more about the basic techniques. Later on, I would say there's a period of probably 10 years where all I did was just learn songs.
Right.
And I think my playing probably got moderately better during then, but it wasn't 10 years worth of better.
Well, because you're putting it all into action too. You're taking all that woodshedding and then applying it.
Yeah.
I think there's an argument there, right? Like, I definitely think that you're advancing. You're taking all those technical skills that, I mean, you can't play scales. I mean, they're scales.
Right. You're not going to go you don't go to band rehearsal and then say, okay, guys, let's play. We're going to play in C Mixolydian.
Yeah.
Let's go.
Yeah. Ooh, I can do like do like, no, that doesn't work. But, and that what's great is that then you get that 10-year span where you get to like apply it and like
that was really
the benefit.
Yeah. That was really all the time of learning how to play with other people.
Right.
That was the time of like learning the bassists, like learning the role and kind of understanding, what I needed to be doing, where I needed to be in the song, where I needed not to be.
Sure.
Things like that. But nowadays, I would say, and so that was like maybe the first 15 years. And then I would say, this last 10 years, or no, 15 years, I guess, I would say I've been more purposeful about it. I am not going to lie and say that I practice every day. I don't.
Yeah.
I just don't. I can't do it as a working guy who's got a different daytime job where music's not my living.
Yeah.
And with, I've got 2 kids, there's the whole family, there's all the other obligations that come with that.
Yeah.
I don't get to practice every day,
Yeah.
but I do probably practice 3 times a week, I would say,
Right.
on average. And I would say out
Which
of
is
that
good.
time, yeah, it's not bad.
That is, yeah.
And typically if I sit down to practice, I'm going to do it for a couple hours, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
And when I sit down, I usually have a goal in mind. And I would say half the time that I do it, it's for learning songs. I need
Right.
to learn this song, or I need to brush up on this, or I need to work on this for this gig that I have this weekend,
Right.
or this rehearsal that I have this weekend, or whatever the case may be.
Yep.
And I do that because that's where the pay is going to come from,
Yep.
right? They don't care if I can play a scale faster than I did last year. They want me to know the songs.
Yeah.
The other half, though, is I count that as like my real development time. And so I'll spend that with a study online.
Yeah.
Like I might find there may be a pattern that I want to get down. There may be a certain certain fingerings that I'm
Right.
trying to get with that other people are showing. There's tons of things on YouTube that you can digest at any point. And like if you run out of
Yeah.
ideas, you don't have to do it yourself. You don't have to go it alone.
Yeah.
Right? You call up YouTube and like somebody's going to show you something that you have not done and that you cannot do right.
Yeah.
And then, I work on that for an hour.
Right.
And what I try and do is for that time, I make it my goal that when I leave that half hour, or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to know how to do that thing, whatever it is. I'm going to be noticeably better at it than I was
Right.
at the start.
Yeah. That's cool.
So
Yeah.
what about you?
See, I think that's really that's good. Like I think that's very impressive that you have those habits in place. And, I will just say one of the other things too, as I was kind of exploring this topic over the past few weeks, I started asking random bass players that I admire, right?
Yeah.
That are out there, and I'll ask them what their practice habits are. And
Yeah.
what was amazing to me is that so many don't have a practice routine. They don't have, they don't talk anything about, it's almost like taboo.
Yeah.
And I realized okay, but that's been me, right? Like
Yeah.
if someone asked me a year ago, what do you practice? I'm like, I'd probably say, I practice, 3 or 4, maybe 5 times a day, because 3 or 4 days out of the week I'm gigging.
Mm-hmm.
And that's practice.
Right,
And I
right.
start to fit things into what could be practice
Right.
versus like actual practice.
Yep.
And, and so that's, to me, like what you have in place is actually, it's cool. Very impressive. So, yeah. So for me, I would say like practice, like as of the past few years, really just looks like learning songs.
Yeah.
I mean, sporadically, I would kind of learn, like from a time standpoint, it was sporadic. It's just like all over the place. Like, oh, I've got, some time here. I'm going to time block this. And I would just learn like 2 or 3 songs, whatever I need to either brush up on or just learn whatever songs.
Right.
Or maybe I would get I remember I went through a period a couple of years ago where I just started like learning new songs that I've always wanted to.
Oh,
and then just
yeah.
like start tackling like them and
You know,
and do that.
I went through a phase like that.
Yeah.
Like literally last month, I kind of, for whatever reason, just pulled out a couple artists that I always loved the work.
Yeah.
And I guess I probably tried it when I was young and was like, this is way beyond.
Right.
And pulled them back out. And now 25 years later, I'm like, oh, I have gotten a little better because
Yeah.
this isn't really it's not that bad anymore.
Right. It takes work, but
Yeah.
but you can do it.
But I can do it. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Totally. And so I've had little things here and there, but for me, and I guess I'm going back in time, right? So then, but if I look at like my first few years, like my first year of playing bass, it was just like me in love with the bass and twiddling my fingers around on it and like getting sounds out of it.
Yeah.
It was awful. God bless my roommates.
Look at me, I'm a bass player.
Oh man, I played it. I played it out of like my my Pioneer stereo.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it was just awful. Like it's like in the the microphone jack of it. Awful.
Oh my goodness.
And then I took lessons for 2 years, and
Right.
then I moved, and then I moved to Fredericksburg or somewhere around there, something like that. And then I ended up. And then I took lessons again with a guitar player who basically was really into like kind of Eastern music, and we spent a lot of time around like like modal scales and then
Right.
detuning and weird stuff. Like
Right.
I really started to expand like what I can do on the bass. And then, and then and that was probably like the first, I would say all of that took place first 5 years. And then,
Yeah.
there's a big period of time where basically after that, once you start gigging
Yeah.
regularly, it's like, learn the song.
It becomes all about songs. And so, having a good repertoire of songs is, definitely a really important thing. So
very practical.
I would say it's very practical. There's no reason, like, I don't think anybody should be ashamed of like spending time practicing songs, because you learn a lot about timing, a lot about intonation, about space and groove from studying the players that you really, really like. You learn about them, you synthesize that, and then you kind of become your own player. Maybe not, the day after you do that, but 10 years after you've been digesting this stuff, it starts to come out of you, and you're in a way that is you.
Absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
So that stuff is very good.
Yeah. All the years of like playing, reggae stuff and then funk and rock and jazz and blues, and
it becomes the amalgam that is whatever player you're going to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely.
So what about people who are able to practice longer? Like, I know that I've seen plenty of things out there for people who are like, I mean, they're practicing like I do my job during the day.
Yeah.
Because that is their job.
Right. Pro musicians. Yeah. Yes. And that's also part of like the backdrop of all this that's like been burning in my mind, is that I'm listening to all these interviews, and if I sort of like, if I put together the bassists and musicians, not just bassists, but mostly bassists, because that's what I'm listening to, but these professionals that have come out of school, like whether it's Berkeley or, wherever, like some major music school, and they're talking about how they're still practicing now. Like it's still part of their job to do 2 to 3 to 4 hours a day. And so many of these bass players that are like pros and they're in their 50s and 60s, they're still like blocking out that time.
Right.
But the one thing that I think really starts it is that when they're in music school, it's something that I know I never had the opportunity to, and so many of the musicians that I know haven't had that opportunity, is like having 4 years of higher education where you're just 24/7 music.
Right.
I mean, you think about that, like
Right.
I get to this point where I'm like, you know what? I'm gonna foreclose on my house and go back to college and just do 4 years of only music. Like that sounds dreamy. And then my wife gives me like,
reality slap.
Yeah.
I think all of us have
cool.
probably had that dream at one time or another of just kind of, packing it in and saying, you know what, I'm going to take a few years off and I'm going to go back to school and
that's right.
learn to play like these kids. And
I
mean, maybe that's an option for some people.
Sure.
I hear that like the brain is more neuroplastic, right? That's what they call it. Like you have neuroplasticity is your brain's ability to like adjust to new knowledge and reshape itself, like form new pathways and give you new skills and stuff. That your brain doesn't stop being able to do that just because you're older. And there are all sorts of environmental factors that affect it. And one of the things is like if you play music a lot, your neuroplasticity is going to be higher than people who don't do something that exercises the brain like that.
Right. Yes.
So that, who knows? That might be an option for somebody. I think for me, it's something I dream of on a regular basis, but I know that it is not realistic.
Well, because I also dream of retirement, but
I do that too. Maybe it'll be right around the corner. I keep hoping for a big buyout. I don't think it's going to happen.
Oh, a podcast buyout.
Yeah, who knows? We're on the market. I'm just waiting.
Is that what we're doing here?
I don't know.
Is this our retirement plan?
Bring, who's Elon Musk? You want to buy our podcast?
That's
Are you kidding? Oh my gosh. I've dreamed of this moment, Elon.
Private sale.
Yeah. So,
but the thing,
he's taking Practical Base private.
That's right.
So what do you do though if you can't do that though? If you're
Right.
you're not in a position to drop your job or your mortgage or whatever and go back to, apply to Berkeley, get in, play for 4 years there. How
Right.
do you make a regimen that's going to work?
And that's exactly where I got to is like, okay, I can't do that, but I can, there are practices that you can put in place. And part of it is just creating a plan, creating a practice plan, something that's attainable, something that is, it's a regiment that is like set in place and has, some parameters around, has goals.
It goes right back to our time blocking episode.
Right.
And if you guys listening haven't heard that, you're going to want to go back and listen to that episode on time blocking, because I really think it will have an impact for you. But that's what you're talking about.
That's exactly it. So then I start thinking about like, okay, so how do you create this? And that is actually the first part for me is the time blocking.
Making the time for it.
Yeah.
And what would that look like? I mean, you could do it different ways, right?
Yeah. So, and part of this, I'll talk about what my plan is, and then, also just some like ideas, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because it's whoever, wants to take this on. This is your plan. This is your time, your project. My goal was to set 30 minutes a day.
Yeah. That's brilliant.
And I do it, I'm sneaking in more time because because I'm getting hooked on it, but it is every morning.
Yeah.
Almost like in a meditative state.
That's great.
Before the coffee, before any of that, just,
you wake up and you're in a very receptive state, I think, at that point. It's only everything that happens after that kind of like makes you, progressively want to shut down as you go through the day.
Yeah.
Like all the things that happen in life. And so at that point, though, you're totally open to whatever's coming.
Yeah.
What a great opportunity.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't have to do it every day, right? I mean,
No.
like I said, I do, and I'm not trying to like make excuses for my regimen. I actually really like the idea of yours so much that it's starting to, tick in the back of my brain. Hey, maybe I should make that a goal for next month. Like try and start something up like that. But you could also do like, maybe that won't work from somebody. Like they already have to get up super early, catch a train, whatever, van pool. They got it, whatever, drive to work, slave away for the man or whatnot.
Right. Maybe you exercise in the morning. I know some people do that and that's also good.
Yeah.
Don't like whatever habits. And all of this stuff is a lot like, to me, it's like exercise.
You
or meditating or whatever it is. It's like things that you have to put in place.
You do it, but you also have to make it work for you or you won't keep up with it.
That's right. Yeah.
So, you could do like that 3 days a week, cut out an hour every 3 days a week. Like maybe you do it like Tuesday, Thursday, and Saturday or something like that. Or, at worst, you try and cram all that in like, Sunday is my lazy day. So I'm going to put in several hours that day. There are trade-offs for that. I think most neuroscientists will tell you you benefit more from doing less more often than doing it all at one time, if that makes sense. Right. So like 15 minutes a day.
Right.
Is going to be way more powerful than 3 hours all at once on the weekend.
Yeah.
Right.
And what's 15 minutes? You can get on your phone in the morning and like scan through social media for 15 minutes.
Yes.
And wonder where that 15 minutes went. Instead, just plug in some practice in there. It's to me the shorter spans is better for me because I feel like every day I'm building on the last bit of exercise.
Yep.
The challenge I've had with doing like the once a week is that I learn so much. I get I kind of burn out in that one session.
Yeah.
And then the following week, I have to redo it all.
Right.
Because it doesn't sink in. But anything is better than nothing.
Definitely.
But I'll definitely preach the like more regular, even if it's like 3 times a week, just something that has more of like a regularity than once a week.
Yeah, you would rather
you're going to get more benefit out of it.
Yeah, you want that cadence.
Yeah.
So what kind of what kind of skills would one set up to improve? I mean, there's a lot of possibilities here.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah. And that's where like, with the whole goal setting thing and we were talking about time blocking, like setting goals. And even when we talked about the having, crucial conversations,
Yes.
like all this is about setting those goals.
Right. It's not just about like, hey, I've got this time set aside. You also have to decide ahead of time.
Yeah.
Here's what I'm going to do with it. And that way you're not kind of frittering it away saying, oh, well, there went my 15 minutes. I guess I didn't have a plan.
Right. Or there goes like 12 months and you look back and say like, what did I like?
Yeah. What was my plan?
What was my, like, where was I 12 months ago? And was there even a plan?
Yeah.
Or, and that's why I think having a goal is, important,
Right.
whether something that's attainable. So, I mean, and that can be anything, right? For everybody has sort of these pockets, when you look at like the sight reading piece, which
Right.
is something that I am, somewhat fearful of. I'm definitely, I procrastinate that.
Right.
I will be honest.
Right. So
with
that,
the
I mean,
world.
but that's a thing where, if you're doing this on your own, you can grab it. No one's there to judge you except yourself. And that's,
Right.
and then you can be fair with yourself and not
Yeah.
have to do it like, oh, well, instead I'm going to learn how to sight read at this gig in front of 400 people.
Yeah.
I'm going to learn that I don't know autumn leaves as well as I thought
Yeah.
I did or whatever.
And that's right. And I think all of this really is under this umbrella of like just like pillow talk with yourself. Just be honest with yourself,
yeah.
know like where your strengths are and where your weaknesses are. We
Yeah.
all have a tendency to not want to talk about what we're not good at.
Yeah.
Or what we've avoided.
Right. And, so, and there, there's a bunch of examples that,
Mm-hmm.
that you provided that are really good. I mean, are you as a player, I'm not asking you, Dave, but I mean, like, I'm asking our audience,
Yeah.
right? Ask yourself, do you feel comfortable if somebody pointed to a random fret on your fretboard?
Right.
Could you name that note? Like,
That's
how
right.
fast could you name that note?
Yeah.
If it's not as fast as you would like,
Uh-huh.
that's something that you can do,
Yeah.
right?
You can learn that. All of these things are things you can
all
you
of
can
these things are
learn.
learnable. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like taking theory and kind of
Uh-huh.
applying it to your bass parts. Like, I'm trying to outline a chord here. Well,
Right.
what chord is this? And what degree of the scale or the
Yep.
key of the song
Yep.
is that chord in?
That's right.
Figuring those things out,
Yep.
knowing different rhythms, like being able to interpret odd rhythms and polyrhythms and just even being able to dissect a simple 4/4 into different subdivisions
Yep.
and that kind of thing. Being able to play and sing at the same time,
That's a huge one.
right? Those are
Yeah.
things you could work on.
Right.
You have something here, textural skills.
So for me, this
I'm
is
intrigued.
this encompasses like all of the other and I'm probably making up. I'm using it the wrong term, but for me, it's just the way that you approach the tone and different ways to
Yeah.
attack your bass.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Like you know what? You might not be the bass player that that slap bass comes natural to,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
why not learn it?
That speaks
Or-
to me. Like, that speaks to me very deeply because
Yeah.
when I first started playing, like for my first 10 or 15 years,
Yeah.
I talked myself into not being able to do that.
Right.
You can't do that.
You can
You'll
you
never
convince
learn.
yourself. Yeah.
You're hopeless at this.
Yeah.
And
You'll justify it too.
Yeah.
Like it's not even you can't even use it in music.
oh yeah,
It's
yeah.
not even like
Who
it's not
needs
practical.
that?
Yeah.
Who
Yeah,
needs
yeah,
that?
Yeah.
And then, I basically started putting myself in situations where I had to learn it because that felt like the honest thing to
Right.
do. And then that kind of, forced me to
That's
work
right.
on those parts.
Yeah. Or pick bass,
Yep. Playing with a pick.
And none of this is like any of these like textural things to me is like better or worse. Playing, trying to emulate an upright bass off of an electric bass.
Yes.
It's so cool to be
Yeah.
able to do that because you never know when you'll need to, right? Like having all these like different textures that you can bring.
I love this. I know you were kind of playing it off, but I really love this idea that this textural skill is about, it's about interpretation, and it's about getting the bass to generate textures, sound textures that you want.
Yeah.
That really, I mean, I think that's super because, you see a lot of people employ this, they'll play with a thumb only to get a certain, and palm muting and all sorts of things that you can do to make your bass sound different for different songs. And that's, all of these things are going to make you a better player, whether whether you consciously are embarking on it or not. And the thing is, if you consciously embark on it, you're going to get better at it sooner than if you just happened into it by accident.
That's right.
What a great idea.
Yeah.
Right? Studying new, you might study a new genre.
Yeah.
You might be working on like, hey, my hand gets tired when I play too long. So I need to just kind of like develop my endurance a bit. Not work through the pain, because that's never good. No. That's not a good idea. But just being able to
learn how to make it comfortable so that you can go for a while.
So here's like case in point. One of the things that I consciously worked on, and I would say this is around my third or fourth year of playing bass. Yeah. I still had like badly flying fingers. Oh, totally. Flying pinky especially.
Oh, yeah.
Where they're like flapping all around. And
that's a great moment, I think, for any bass player. Like when you get, at a certain point, you start to notice that your pinky is going.
Yeah. Yeah, your pinky's just wherever it wants to be, and it's not helpful. Wherever it is, it's not a helpful place. And so, I actually spent the better part, I'm not lying, the better part of 6 months. I practiced against a wall, like literally just stood against a wall. My forehead was on the wall. Thank God I was in this is in college, and thank God I was in a room that was a single, because if I had a roommate, they probably would have like turned me into,
padded walls, baby.
Yeah, health services or whatever. Like my roommate is probably going to hurt somebody. Yeah. So I just stood up against a wall and played against it, and that forced my left hand to get better at that.
That's right. Yeah.
But
that's
cool. all these things that you can do with that time. But then there's the one last there's that one last time blocking factor. Right.
That's right. Is to build in accountability.
Yeah.
Like whatever that looks like for you, but if you want to be honest with yourself, like for me, I'm the type of person that I share it with people. Right? Like I'll share it with Paul. I'm sharing it on the podcast, but I'll share it, sharing it to the world. Yeah. No, but I mean I'll share it to people that are close to me.
Right.
Even my kids, right?
Yeah.
Because that's my accountability.
Yeah.
Because I don't want to be called out of like, hey, you said you would do this. Where are you now?
Yeah.
But
even making yourself accountable to the point of like, maybe it's keeping a public journal.
Right.
If you are not comfortable doing that, there's a limit to all things. And we do believe in moderation in all things. So we're not saying that if you're a very private or a shy person, and the idea of doing that, if that is completely, out of the question for you for whatever reason, you can make yourself accountable, I think, by writing it down. Like that's right. If you put it, make a journal.
Yeah.
And if you have a plan in your journal that outlines each day what you're going to do. And, I think you could probably do that in advance.
That's right.
That keeps you accountable, because every day you turn the page, there's what you're supposed to be doing that day.
Yeah.
And now you can be accountable for it. Okay, this is what I need to do. And you can go through it and be done and know that that is one more day that you're now better than you were the day before.
Yeah. You could even like on an electronic, like you could set up like an Excel sheet.
Yeah.
That just has days and little boxes, and you just check off like, scales, transposing, whatever, like all these different skills, and it's not that you're going to grade it or whatever, but you just want to make sure that when you look back the past week, the past month, the past year,
you know what you did that day.
You know what you did. You can kind of see like how many checks and how many blanks.
Right.
You know, if you see two months straight with blanks, like, well, that's what happened.
Yeah, you now have a way of looking at that and saying, okay, that's something I need to correct.
Yep.
Right. You can't talk yourself out of looking at like 50 blank lines.
Right.
You know
exactly.
What I mean? But also, again, every day is another day to turn it around. Right.
Sure. Yeah. Which is the beauty of all of this. Right.
Right.
So then you have like, so if you have like the plan, you have like the whole thing is set in place, and then you're ready to like build this practice regiment, then like the next step for me was, you know, what tools are out there?
Right.
What do I
Right.
have that's available? Because what's really cool is that it's like 2018.
You're correct.
It's the future.
You're correct.
It
It's
is the future.
2018.
Officially the future. It's 2018. And if we think about like part of this, we're talking about when we first got started.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about the lessons that I was taking, which were like really cool,
Yeah.
but very classical studied
Yeah.
because it was all based off of like, you know, certain studies that were based off of like, you know, the you know, the classic like Mel's like books and all of that.
Right.
Right. So now we are in a world where like there's the internet and there are so many resources out there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I just realized that it literally is 30 years since I
Right.
bought, like I picked up,
Yeah.
bought, started playing my first bass. It was 1988.
Yep.
And I can't fathom all of the resources that we have now. Like what I had when I started, and not to be like old man, like get off my lawn, just
Right.
more that it's an amazing time to be out there,
Yeah.
because like when I started, I bought some music books. I had a
Yeah.
pamphlet. I had this like pamphlet sized book that it turns out they still sell, by the way.
Really?
I don't have the name of it in front of me. I'll try and find it for the show notes. But it is a pamphlet-sized book that is made to fit like in your bass case, like under the neck or whatever, or in the pocket.
Yeah.
And you open it up, and it basically is like a complete primer on how to play the bass,
Right.
from like how to hold your hand,
Right.
how to pluck a note, all the way to doing some simple scales and understanding a little bit of music notation if you didn't already know that, as I did.
Yeah.
So it has all of these different things in it.
It's like you buy the bass, you're like, oh, here's a bass.
It's
and
yeah.
instructions on how to play it.
Yeah, literally.
That's all
it's
you
like
need.
that. Like it was the equivalent of like the Hohner harmonica books,
Right.
where it would give you like
Right.
blowing and drawing and all those
Right.
sorts of things. So, I went from that and a couple books, literally books of sheet music, right? Bought off the shelf for a couple albums that I really liked.
Yeah.
And, going from that to nowadays, where everything you could possibly imagine you can get out there digitally, like including essentially the equivalent of a one-on-one lesson with a great player who's showing you how to do things
Right.
that you can rewind at any time and just keep going back,
Yeah. Yeah. And so, and I think, and I toyed with this, right? Because I say the internet, there's just so much there, right? Because everything is there. But there's also, you could also take lessons online.
Yeah, absolutely.
That are either like real time or also like, okay, I pay this amount per month and I can like dip into whatever, whatever lesson I want to learn for that period of time.
Yeah. So what are some other things? I mean, the internet, we could go on all day.
Yeah.
It's so big, dude.
Yeah,
the internet is so much.
It's literally worldwide.
It's like worldwide.
It's like
it's
universe wide. They should call it the universe wide web because nothing else is going on in the universe. So you might as well just take
That's
that.
not very
Why didn't
catchy,
they?
Dave. Your marketing license is revoked.
Marketing.
The universe
All
wide.
right. Well, hey, I think a metronome is super important if you're going
Yes,
to talk about
yes.
practice.
Oh my gosh.
And in fact, I think, and I'll take it one step further,
Please,
that there are
everybody.
metronomes with now whatever you call like drop beats or
Yes.
whatever they're called, where they basically pull out beats either randomly or you can schedule them in.
Please, everyone, if you don't have one, get a metronome. I mean, you have a phone, most likely.
Yep.
You're probably listening to us on it right now.
Yeah.
Get a metronome app. You can get them free.
Yeah.
Perfectly good ones.
Yep.
There's no reason that a player, any player nowadays, should not be in possession of
Yep.
and using a metronome, even if it's simply for building your internal time clock, right?
Yeah. I mean, I use a metronome really only when I'm doing kind of, chord progressions and scales. I mean, when I'm exploring different styles, there's other things that we can use for that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like it's crucial. And as bassists, rhythm is kind of important.
Yeah, we live and die by that beat.
Yeah.
So
And then one of the things that I've really come into recently is the reference tone, the drones, whatever you can use for it. Like, I don't know, you could have a keyboard that does it or whatever, but online you can get a bunch of like kind of, there are websites where you can hit like a D.
Right.
Maybe like a cello D, right? Because
Right.
the cello has like those nice tones.
Right.
And it helps you really understand, like, for me, it puts in place all of like the arpeggios and the scales and all of that. It starts to make much more sense when you have a reference tone in there.
Right, right.
It is a difference.
You can use it for interval training, chord training, all sorts of things.
You start to really hear the modes.
Yeah.
You know, instead of just knowing like, oh, the mode is just like an extension of this and this, no, you start to hear like what they really feel like, what they sound like.
Agreed. Highly agreed.
Yeah.
So what else is out there? Visual aids. Oh, you know what? Visual aids. I will always think of those, those couple posters that are like, there's like super mystical looking with like fire on them, and they like the wheel of fourths and the circle of fourths and circle of fifths, and like they're all mystical with these Chinese ideograms, and you know the ones I'm talking about.
Yeah.
They're like, you probably found them on like every guy who was playing guitar in like 1971 had one of these on his wall or something.
Oh yeah, or the poster of like that guitarists will have with like of the chord fingerboards, like all of them on one poster.
Yep.
They never used the poster, but they had him there.
But you have the poster.
You got the poster. But that's
counts.
kind of what I'm thinking about, right? Like
it sinks in.
It does. Like, and it's because we all learn in a different way. And some people see shapes, some people see the patterns, some people like whatever. That's
whatever works.
That's not anything for us to judge, but whatever
works for you is the right thing. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So what are some other things?
I think a keyboard is a huge thing to have.
I think those are very, very useful too. And, you can get you can get a mini, like even just a small 1 octave or 2 octave keyboard controller for so cheap, right? $50.
Yeah. Oh, you can go to a garage sale and get an old Casio for like $5 or $1.
I just want a Casio again that I can press a button and be like, book, pick, boop, kick, boop, pick. I just want that.
But and for those, like I think the beauty of the piano really is that just the way that the notes are laid out. Mm-hmm. This might be, this might be clearly obvious to a lot of people, but you have to like understand that is the way the notes lay out there. All this theory stuff really starts to make much more sense.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. Like your natural notes versus your accidentals and so forth. Right.
Yeah.
And, some other things out there, I think there's reading material, especially, having fake books is great because that way you've got a set of chords or changes that you can kind of walk through. You can find a million YouTube videos, not to mention actual artist renditions of songs that you can then kind of follow along with a fake book and listen to what the bass player is doing. You can kind of dissect it. You might transcribe it, but you can also compare it to what's written. You might see there are differences or similarities and then be able to actually like pull that in and synthesize that as part of your learning as well.
Exactly. Yeah. One of the big things as far as like tools to put in place or for me are the constraints in general.
Yeah.
Right. So that's like if you're and this is not to get like too technical as to like what, practice exercises are out there because there's like thousands of them and they're being invented all the time and you can invent them. Yeah. Right. But it's creating some constraints. So if you're doing some sort of like, if you're doing like arpeggios, do the arpeggios in a circle of fifths, right? So that there's a pattern of how you're doing them. Yes. But you can only do them in the first like 5 frets. Yeah. Because what that does is it forces you to change shapes. Yes. And then add constraints like, and I have to name every note that I play while I do it. Right. It's like lifting weights and putting more stuff. And those are the painful exercises. Those are the ones that you're like, but I don't wanna. that like when you get to that point that you don't want to do it, that's your stretch.
Right.
That's your stretch exercise where you're
Right.
like, oh, this one hurts, or like
Right.
do, fourth intervals, but only on one string, and
Yeah.
you can't go past your you can't go past the 12th fret. and you have to like randomly find it, and
Right.
it's forcing you to know your notes. It's forcing you to be quicker and forcing you to learn, like, understand your neck.
Yep.
Those constraints, those games that you can play are like, and that's where you see a
That's
lot of musicians,
gold.
they have these practice skills, and it's because at the end of the day, they're having fun with it.
Yes.
And they're
Yes.
curious, and it's that Zen thing of like, be the student.
I love it. I love it. Be the student.
Be the student, man.
Fantastic. Well, what a great talk, man. I'm really inspired by that. And I hope that some of our listening audience also was inspired. We would love to hear your feedback. We'd love to hear feedback about this episode, or even what you're doing with your practice routines that is fun and exciting and keeping you engaged. You can do that through our website at practicalbass.com. You can use the contact form there to email us, or you can just email us directly at podcast@practicalbass.com. You can contact us on Facebook or Google+, even Instagram or Twitter. We'd love to hear from our listeners, so please don't be shy. We love to hear from folks, any kind of feedback, plus or minus. And we look forward to doing this again for you each week. The way that you can help us is twofold. One of them is to subscribe. That's very easy. You simply visit your favorite podcast or podcatching app. That might be podcasts on your Apple iPhone. It might be iTunes on your Mac device. It might be Google Play, or it might be Stitcher Radio, or any of a number of other podcatching apps that are out there. Search for Practical Bass and hit the subscribe link. You'll get a fresh episode delivered to you every week.
Yep.
And we can't wait to bring you the next one of these, so that you get something fresh in your inbox that you can really jog those creative impulses in your brain. And we also hope that you will do the second thing, which is share this with friends. And it doesn't mean just telling them word of mouth. We really would appreciate it if you share via social media. If you see a post from us, feel free to echo it out. That helps us, because it helps us reach more people. When we reach more people, there's more ability for us to kind of bring the bass community together, and that's what we really yearn for. So we hope that you will do that as well. Either way, we hope you enjoyed this episode of Practical Bass. And until next time, I'm Paul Frields.
And I'm Dave Guzman.
This has been Practical Bass.
Thanks for listening. All right, I got it now. No, that is not. That is unprofessional right
That's
there.
super unprofessional. Right in the middle. We're like, and then, and then I had an idea.
It's like that like meditative moment before you hit the record button, and of course that just broke everything. All right, let's